at that time, this is 30 years ago. And so I moved out to Jackson Township, and I, of course, no longer had city income tax. Now, the business that I managed, I didn't own the business, but I basically determined everything that was going to happen there. I realized, well, you know, the business is still in Kansas City, so I'm still paying that tax. So if I move the business out to Jackson Township, then I lose that tax, and about half my other employees that did not live in the city will also have their tax rates reduced. So I thought that'd be a benefit for everybody. So then I moved the business out to Jackson Township. So a couple things happened. For one, employees are happy. I had more money in my pocket, and the city of Canton lost revenue because that business went on, you know, to be very profitable, and the employees kept paying their taxes. They weren't in Kansas City anymore. So this was a drift of revenue away from Kansas City. This is the same thing happening in the state of Ohio on a larger scale. I'll give you another example. The state of Delaware. I was doing an audit with a small business, historic farming community in central Delaware. Too far away to be a bedroom community in any big city. No college there, nothing to draw people to this location. And this place was booming. There were 3 shopping centers being built. There were apartment buildings. There were roads. There was new housing going up. And I'm like, what is this? There's no reason for this to be going on. State of Delaware, it's not a hot spot for anything. So, of course, the people I'm working with, usually I spend 2 to 3 days with the companies when I'm auditing. And I said, what's driving this? And he says, oh, that's real simple. So these are all the retirees from New Jersey. Said for the price that they can save in property taxes, they can come over here to Delaware and buy a house for what they're paying in taxes in New Jersey. And I said, I also came over here because, you know, with all these retirees coming over, there was a lot of healthcare jobs. And so I sold my place in New Jersey, and I came over here, and I've got a bigger house and paying less money overall. So, again, of course, Governor Christie's doing his best to turn that around and making some progress. But another example of people walking away from high taxes and regulation. The next example was just a few weeks ago, traveling down in Alabama, going down the interstate. I come up to Hyundai Parkway, and Hyundai Parkway, what's that about? And I look in the distance, and there was an auto plant that extended as far as the eye could see. And the state of Alabama helped them out. Of course, it's a non-union right-to-work state, and I'm not sure quite how many people are employed at that plant, but it has to be a few thousand. Like I say, it went as far as the eye could see. And I kept on traveling into Birmingham and then South Birmingham, and I come up to Kia Expressway. And here again, an auto plant as far as the eye could see. And, you know, we have skilled workers here in Ohio, but those people never even considered coming here. They would definitely just look at right-to-work states to expand their business. So people individually, these retirees in Delaware, individuals made the decision to walk away from high taxes and regulation. Industries coming to this country chose to go, you know, they walk with their feet away from high taxes and regulation. And this is exactly what is happening here in the state of Ohio. I had the opportunity to listen to the governor weeks ago, and that was exactly the story he was saying, and that is why he pushed for SB 5. You know, he's a solid Buckeye, has a real heart for the state, wants to see this state grow and prosper, and the citizens of the state grow and prosper. But if everybody's leaving, or large numbers are leaving, then we all lose. You look at your property values. Property values go down. Why is that? Well, nobody's buying houses because they're leaving the state. Of course, right now no one can sell their house either. But you know, traveling down in Texas, you know, any city you go into in Texas, new housing going up, new roads being built, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, new skyscrapers going up. You know, when is the last time we've had a building over 20 stories built in the state of Ohio? You know, it just doesn't happen. And there's a very big reason for that. It's a poor business climate here. I deal a lot with regulations in healthcare industry. And again, before I go into each state, we have to check out the regulations that are going on in that state. Ohio has more than anybody. I had the opportunity, I served on board of directors for a healthcare organization here in the state, and goes back about 10 years ago, and they wanted to get special licensing for the organization. This is for home medical equipment companies. And they said, oh, this would be great. We need more regulation. And so all the people on the board that I was serving on said, let's get this process in place because we need more regulation. And I'm thinking, what the heck? And so I was the only one opposed it. And when they were going up to the, down in Columbus in the State House for final hearing, they knew that I opposed the added regulations, although these folks think it's going to bring them more money. It was only going to chase money away. They gave me a call and said, Dana, you're not going to show up down there, are you? Because they tell us it only takes one insider to derail this thing. And I was the only insider that was opposed to it. And so, I said, if you guys want it so bad, I'm staying home. And so, we got the regulation. Now it's just one more thing. All these companies that wanted this regulation today are looking to consolidate. They're laying off. They don't know what their future is. And they just putting their own tombstone out there. So I've just seen so many examples across the country and locally of people, businesses walking away from taxes and regulation. And SB 5 is mostly about tax issues and some about regulations in union organizing. So people will walk, and we need to hold this state together. And Melanie, I'll back up in healthcare. You mentioned about the latest commercial. I just saw that, I think today, first time, and talking about the baby. Well, saying the staffing levels, they won't be able to determine staffing levels. Well, again, the state does not employ very many healthcare workers or government. The only state workers you might see would be in some of the mental institutions, and there's only 3 or 4 county-owned hospitals left, Metro Hospital up in Cleveland. So this would affect very, very few people. And then in addition to that, there are accrediting agencies, one that I surveyed for, that go in and tell the hospitals, if you're going to be open, if you're going to have a license to provide patient care, these are the staffing levels you will have. So, maybe the unions can ask for additional, but there are other regulations in place that establish minimum staffing levels. So it doesn't even have to come up in a union contract. So once again, the ads that are coming out there are misleading. I did mention this real quick to the my group. One thing was missed in the bio. I'm president of the Akron Tea Party, and speaking with our group last night, it's you're not going to learn about SB 5, Issue 2 in 15-second sound clips. It just will not happen. Either for or against, it's not going to happen because the message trying to get out there is just quick, trying to get to the uninformed voter to get a reaction and hope they'll vote. That's no way to learn about this bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Now that everybody has the document, let me quickly run through what I think are the key points, and I'm going to kind of open up the aperture a bit and try to kind of frame the issue, and then let's get to Q&A, because that's, again, I know you guys have probably lots of questions. So the first chart there that's titled State Government Spends Too Much, what that shows you is the general revenue fund expenditures for the state budget from 1990 through 2013, which means it's the 2 years of the budget that was just passed, projected forward, what they expect to spend. And what that shows you is the general revenue fund expenditures have gone up since 1990 by 148%. After you adjust for inflation, that's 44%. So on average, about 2% more than inflation every single year. And I'll remind you, most of that occurred under Republican control. So the idea that spending is somehow a left or a Democrat problem is actually not true. In many cases, Republicans and conservatives are just as bad at spending money as the other side. So it really is a bipartisan effort to spend money. The next slide down, the gold-plated compensation slide, what that shows you is we took all the data from the last 8 to 10 years in the private sector in Ohio as well as the state government, actual data, and we did a trend analysis to show where would it go if the trends from the last decade applied to the next 3 decades. And what that shows you is that within 30 years, a state worker essentially will cost twice as much as their private sector peer here in Ohio. Again, as Seth talked about, that's just a math problem. You can't have that kind of cost differentials and have a healthy state. If you flip it then to look at the local level, that chart with the state of Ohio on it, that's mostly red, and most of you know red when it comes to numbers is a bad thing. Those numbers come from the Ohio Department of Education, from the 5-year projections that every school district has to submit to ODE. That is from the October data. The reason why October is important is because, you know, what you often hear in this kind of divisive issue is, oh, it's because of Governor Kasich and the budget and the cuts to local governments. That's why you're seeing kind of levy increases or all those types of things. And that's just not true. I mean, certainly the cuts that the budget made are making this picture worse. But this was the picture as of October 2010, before there was a Governor Kasich or a state budget. And what that shows you is that we have a massive spending problem in our local governments, highlighted by the school districts. This data shows you that by 2015, the school districts are projecting an aggregate deficit across the state of Ohio of $7.6 billion. At that time, they project all revenue, 96% of all revenue will go to compensation packages. So you can cut art and music, you can buy cheap toilet paper from China, and do all other kind of cost-saving measures. If you don't tackle compensation packages, you will have to do one of 2 things, which is raise taxes by about $8 billion, or talk about staffing levels. You're going to have to essentially cut young teachers, last in, first out concept, in order to, or janitors or whomever is on the cutting block, if the taxpayers don't decide they're going to approve those levies. So this compensation package problem is a huge issue, especially at the local level, and that's something that's going to have to be solved. One of the reasons that's causing this is if you look at that next chart and you see how the private sector is way down, that shows you the percentages. Over the last 11 years, we've lost about 10% of the private sector jobs in Ohio. At the same time, we've lost about 1% of the government jobs in Ohio. So why I tell you that is because in real numbers, what that means is this. Today, there are about 500,000 fewer net private sector workers in the state of Ohio who can then generate revenue that helps us provide necessary government services. At the same time, there are about the same number, 9,000 fewer, government jobs in the state of Ohio. So you've got about the same size government, but because of the greater than inflation package increases, they cost a whole lot more than they did 11 years ago. And again, all this data is available. You can find it in the BLS or any type of other government source. But the cost is much more expensive. So what you've got is 500,000 fewer private sector workers who are trying to bear the cost of a same-size government with a higher cost structure. Again, as Seth noted, that's a math problem. And you can only solve that math problem by raising taxes, cutting staffing levels, so young firefighters, young police officers, young teachers, young state workers or county workers have to get cut, and programs get cut unless you tackle this compensation package, which at the local level, compensation costs are really the huge driver of budgets, which isn't a surprise. They're service-oriented positions, but nonetheless, to kind of remove that or think that somehow the current system, which created this crisis, is going to somehow alleviate the crisis is a bit naive, but we can talk about that later. If you flip to the very last chart in this document, I've taken those big numbers, 10%, 1%, and put them into the 10 industry sectors that the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks. So this is the latest numbers, and you can look for yourself. We track from January of 1990 to January of 2000 to January of 2010, and then to last month, which is the latest numbers we have in the state of Ohio. And just to put a further point onto this, today in Ohio, we have about 220,000 more private sector jobs than we did 21 years ago.